Welcome to Modern Motoring. I've got a pair of 2025 Mazda CX-70s with me. On your right is the plug-in hybrid version, and on your left is the mild hybrid version. I'm going to borrow some inspiration from Guy Fieri and go with a triple D theme here. And no, it's not diners, drive-ins, and dives. Instead, I'm going to look at the differences, the driving dynamics, as well as the dollar side of it to find out which one could be right for you. Let's start off with the differences. Now, I am in the mild hybrid Turbo 6, and you'll see in the plug-in hybrid it's got a red interior. So differences, let's start with weight. So the Turbo 6 weighs 2,157 kilograms or 4,755 pounds. The plug-in hybrid comes in at 2,344 kilograms or 5,168 pounds, making the plug-in hybrid 413 pounds heavier, and that'll come into play in the driving section. As far as height goes, there is a 3mm difference, with the Turbo 6 being 3mm higher than the plug-in hybrid. Towing, the Turbo 6 gets up to 5,000 pounds of a tow rating, and the plug-in hybrid only gets 3,500. Depending on what you do, you could maybe get away with the 3,500, but there is a significant difference in the towing capacity here. On the cargo side, you'd think there'd be the same, but there's a slight difference. With the rear seats up in the Turbo 6, it's 1,131 liters of cargo space versus 1,122 in the plug-in hybrid. You put that second row of seats down, and the Turbo 6 gets 2,174, and the plug-in hybrid gets just a little less at 2,132. I don't think many people will notice a difference if they're shopping between the Turbo 6 mild hybrid and the plug-in hybrid, but just know there is a small difference in cargo space here. On the tech side of things, the one key difference here, it drives me up the wall. The top trim for the Turbo 6 does get the touchscreen enabled Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and that's because it's the only one out of the 6 trims, 4 for the Turbo 6 and 2 trims for the plug-in hybrid, that come with the larger infotainment screen. I believe it's 12.3 inches, so only on the top trim signature Turbo 6 can you get the touchscreen enabled Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This might be an obvious difference, but I'm going to still include it. The Turbo 6 has 4 trims, as I just mentioned. It's GSL, GT, GTP, and Signature, whereas the plug-in hybrid only gets the 2 trims, and that's the GSL and the GT. And just for reference, I'm driving GTs for both trims, the plug-in hybrid as well as the Turbo 6. Let's jump into power figures and engines, because it's a good segue to the next part, which is the driving. So let's start with the easy one, which is the plug-in hybrid. It's a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. It's got a 17.8 kilowatt per hour battery, and you get up to 42 kilometers of all electric range, 319 horsepower at 87 octane, and you get 4 extra horsepower, meaning you get 323 if you put in 93 octane. I would totally skip the 93 octane, and here's why. Regardless of what type of fuel you put in, you still get the 369 pound-feet of torque, and they both run off an 8-speed automatic transmission, and in Canada it is standard all-wheel drive. Onto the Turbo 6 side, and they both run off a 3.3 liter inline 6-cylinder turbocharged engine. The regular output, which is what I have here on the GT and also comes on the GSL, is 280 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. If you opt for the high output version, it's 319 horsepower at 87 octane and all the way up to 340 horsepower at 93 octane. And just like the plug-in hybrid, your torque is 369 pound-feet. I know that Mazda did this for the CX-90, and the CX-90 and the CX-70 are very similar dimensionally, the way they're laid out. I don't see a lot of value in opting for the high output engine. Usually you pick something with more power because you want to be able to tow more, but regardless of what engine you have with the Turbo 6, you're still getting 5,000 pounds of towing. Let's jump into fuel consumption, and we'll start with the Turbo 6 because there are 2 sets of numbers. The regular output gets you 9.3 liters per 100 kilometers combined, and the high output version is only a touch higher at 9.5 liters per 100 kilometers, a 0.2 liters per 100 kilometer difference. The interesting thing is the regular output runs off a 70 liter fuel tank just like the plug-in hybrid version, but the high output version runs off a 74-liter fuel tank. On the plug-in hybrid side of things, in addition to the 42 kilometers of all-electric range, again through that 17.8 kilowatt-hour battery, your liters per 100 kilometers combined comes in at 9.4, and the liters equivalent is 4.2. What does that translate to in total distances per tank and charge for the PHEV? Well, on the Turbo 6 side with a 70-liter fuel tank, it's around 752 kilometers of total distance driven on a full tank of fuel. And on the plug-in hybrid side, Mazda says you're getting a total of 789 kilometers per full tank and full charge. The breakdown of that is 747 kilometers on the fuel side, and again, the 42 kilometers on the electric side. Let's shift into the driving side of things, and let's just get straight to the point. The Turbo 6 drives much better and much more enthusiastically than the plug-in hybrid does. I don't know if the 413 pounds of extra weight on the plug-in hybrid side makes a difference. I don't know if it's the 3.3 liter turbocharged engine versus the 2.5 naturally aspirated with the battery, but I found the driving experience here to be much more enjoyable. I'm not going to say it's fun to drive. Like, this is a big two-row crossover that also doubles as a mid-size three-row crossover, so it's not quite fun. But I will say this, that of all the mainstream brands for things that are not performance cars / sports cars, Mazda to me has the best driving dynamics, whether that's the CX-5, CX-50, or even the CX-90. The driving dynamics really shine through here, and there's plenty of get up and go, and you feel it. And I know, again, it's a mid-sized three-row / large-sized two-row, but it takes the twists and turns really well, and you still always have that flat feeling and that very stable feeling. And the power delivery is just so smooth, and with the 8-speed transmission for both, thank you Mazda for not going CVT. It really helps accentuate Mazda's long-term belief in, give people a car that drives exceptionally well, give them something that's exciting to drive, and there's no boring side, there's no monotonous side of it. It's something you actually look forward to driving. Now, I understand these are completely different vehicles, and I understand the point of the plug-in hybrid is for the electric side, and they're a little more environmentally conscious on that side. But I find the drive really dull, and it's heavy, and it's laborious, and it just feels like it's struggling to get yourself going. And that's the trade-off that you're looking at. If you want to have that all-electric range of up to 42 kilometers, if your commute is, let's say 20-ish kilometers or even 15-ish kilometers one way, or you're doing something a little under 42 round trip, and you can charge every single night to get a full charge, then, maybe lean towards that. If the driving dynamics side really isn't that much of a priority for you, and you do, again, value the electric side of things, and, you want to be able to skip gas station visits as much as possible, then sure, the plug-in hybrid is the way to go. If you are a little more focused on the excitement of the drive, of having something that's a little peppy, something that feels stronger and feels a little more powerful. And I know the power figures are very, very close, even with the regular output versus the plug-in hybrid, let alone the high output versus the plug-in hybrid. Lean towards this 3.3 liter inline 6 turbocharged engine. The 3.3 does it for me because it also does have that mild hybrid system. And that's how Mazda's branding it. It's their mild hybrid vehicle versus their plug-in hybrid vehicle. And I completely get the marketing and logic behind that. I'm calling it a 3.3 liter turbo because that's still what it is at its heart. And you have the iStop. And in the iStop's defense here on the 3.3 turbo, the activation and deactivation is done very smoothly. You'll still notice it, but it is far from intrusive. There's a small little shake, but if you don't want that, you can easily just reach to the left side of the steering wheel. There's a little panel, and you can shut off the iStop start if you so choose. There's some interesting moments when I was first bringing it home. I was doing 100 on the highway, and I hit that sweet spot, and the revs just went down to 0, and the mild hybrid system kicked in. So, there definitely is an environmental positive here on the 3.3 liter turbo. Not as much as there is on the plug-in hybrid, but to sum up the driving experience, if you want some excitement, go with the 3.3. If you want to have that battery side of things and you don't mind a bit of a lower excitement level on the drive, go for the plug-in hybrid. I flipped to the plug-in hybrid version, and let's use this to go through the dollars portion. There's a lot of numbers to go through, so I will try and be as quick and concise as possible. Let's start with the two relevant numbers, pricing for the PHEV and pricing for the Turbo 6, both GT trims, because that's what I'm testing. On the PHEV side, it's $66,140, and that is your MSRP, your freight, your PDI, and a few other fees. Basically, all you're adding are your provincial taxes. On the Inline 6 Turbo side, GT comes in at $57,140, a difference of $9,000. Here's where things get interesting. In Canada, the PHEV is eligible for an up to $2,500 federal EV rebate. So that brings the price down already. Let's touch on the annual fuel costs, because that brings the gap a little closer, and this is laid out by Natural Resources Canada. For the plug-in hybrid version, it's $2,324 per year. For the Turbo Inline 6, the regular output, because that's what I'm testing, is $2,883, a difference of $559. You take the $9,000 difference in price and divide that by $559, which is the difference in yearly fuel costs, and that gives you a little more than 16 years before you're actually even as far as your fuel costs go. Now, there's a lot of variables with the plug-in hybrid version. Yes, I know that the $9,000 divided by $559 is 16 and a bit years, but it depends on how often you charge the vehicle. It depends on the time of day that you charge. Are you on peak? Are you off peak? Are you mid peak? Are you charging at home or are you charging at work? Because if you charge at work, theoretically, you wouldn't be paying nearly as much to charge up the PHEV as you would if you did it at home, regardless of on peak, off peak, or mid peak. So that definitely is a factor to be considered as well. Factoring in the $2,500 rebate, that brings that $9,000 down to $6,500, and $6,500 divided by the $559 of a difference in yearly fuel cost, bring it down to 11.6 years. So still a lot. But again, all the variables with using a plug-in hybrid, you could really, depending on what you do, how you do it, when you do it, as far as driving habits go, you could fill up once a month, with the majority of your driving being done using the battery. And that would completely skew all of the numbers that I just went through. But because everybody is different, everyone's got different habits and behaviors and lifestyles and what they do. And maybe you're doing a lot of driving, and it really depends on how you're using your CX-70 plug-in hybrid. Let's bring in one more set of numbers, and that is the high output version. $3,515 is the Natural Resources Canada estimated annual fuel cost, which is $1,191 more than the plug-in hybrid version. So that, again, just adds a different layer into what you want. The final set of numbers will be all 6 different trims. Again, this is your MSRP, your freight, your PDI, admin fees, and a few other things. So let's start with the Turbo 6 side. GSL 52540, GT 57140, GTP 61090, Signature 65090. On the PHEV side, you got 2 options. You can go for the GSL, which is the base, at 61,540, or the GT, which is what we have here at the top of the line, is 66,140. A quick touch on the competition, and there's a lot of it, some direct, some indirect, and then I'll get to which one I would pick. So you have the Lexus RX, the BMW X3, the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the Honda Passport, the Toyota Highlander, maybe the Grand Highlander, but nah, I'm going to stick with the regular Highlander. The Lincoln Nautilus, the Chevy Blazer, the Cadillac XT5/XT6, the Volvo XC60, the Acura MDX, and the Infiniti QX60. Again, these are not all direct competitors. Some of them are in the similar arena, but don't compete, exactly 100% with the Mazda CX-70. As far as what I would pick, I'm going to go with the gasoline version, the Turbo 6 with a mild hybrid. it's not just about the saving money side of it. Yes, I'm saving $9,000 minus the $2,500 federal EV rebate brings it down to $6,500. And yes, I realize that gap could be brought even closer depending on how I charge and when I charge and where I charge. It's the driving dynamics that really make a difference to me. Nothing's wrong with the driving dynamics on the plug-in hybrid side. It's just that the ones on the Turbo 6 side, to me, are much better. You have a little more responsiveness, you have a little more excitement, and you have just a little more of an engaged feeling. And yes, I know there are similar setups as far as the all-wheel drive goes, standard in Canada, and the 8-speed automatic. But the 3.3 Turbo 6 versus the 2.5 cylinder engine here in the PHEV, I know the battery has, a factor to play in it, and I know there's a bit of a weight disadvantage for the PHEV because it's a little heavier, but I want something that has some gusto when it drives, and I want something that I'm excited to drive, and I find I get that here in the Turbo 6 more than I get that in the PHEV. That's going to wrap it up for the 2025 Mazda CX-70 mild hybrid versus plug-in hybrid comparison. If you have any questions on what you've seen here, let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. I truly do appreciate the support, and feel free to join the social communities. We're on all the major platforms. And with that, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.